I don't pretend to be an expert on video game development, but I'd be willing to bet that one of the more challenging things about game design is ensuring that a game's themes come across as intended. From gameplay to narrative beats, it has to be difficult to make sure everything synchronizes in a way that delivers the intended message. Fortunately for Fall of Porcupine, that's an area where the game really triumphs. From its difficult minigames, to the characterization of St. Ursula's, and the structure of its story, Fall of Porcupine does what it sets out to do by honoring the lives and experiences of healthcare workers. One of the first things that stood out to me about Fall of Porcupine was the difficulty of its minigames. I spent a good bit of time talking about this in both my review of the demo and the full game. But if you haven't seen those videos, I describe them as challenging tasks that really emphasize just how hard it must be to work in healthcare. I mean, look at the number of buttons you need to hold in this one, and look at how fast you have to push them in this game. Granted, these are both endgame challenges, at a point where the game is really trying to hammer its point home. But the intended experience is clear: to put you in the shoes of a nurse or a doctor who's faced with a task that might be routine to them, but will be damn near impossible for the rest of us. And no matter how routine it might be, I'm sure they, quite often, feel like they could use a second set of hands, as all of us did during this minigame here. Even months later, I'm still really blown away by how well these minigames convey this message. It's the kind of game design that really makes you feel the story the developers are telling instead of just playing it. And in this case, that story is just how difficult it is to work in a hospital. Another way the developers make this point is through their portrayal of St. Ursula's itself. It's not just a location, it really is its own character. From the very beginning of the game, St. Ursula's is depicted as a run-down, resource-starved institution that is barely getting by. The top floor is condemned and abandoned, water leaks onto patients, and doctors are stuck dragging what supplies they do have up through a broken elevator. And through it all, its workers are somehow supposed to deliver quality health care. So much medical media, whether it's Grey's Anatomy or Scrubs, focus on hospitals that are generally pretty well off. Sure, they have their issues, the supply chain still hits them now and then, but generally speaking, Seattle Grey's and Sacred Heart are palaces compared to St. Ursula's. Just as Night in the Woods covered the untold stories of the Rust Belt, Fall of Porcupine covers the untold stories of healthcare. In order to truly understand what doctors and nurses go through on a daily basis, we can't just look at those that are well off. We need to discuss those that are in dire straits, like the one Finley calls home. Which brings me to the flip side of all this. Despite the terrible conditions at St. Ursula's, there are so many people there who take tremendous pride in the work they do. People like Dr. Krokowski, who seemed primed to be an antagonist at the onset of the game, but by the end reveals that she cares deeply about the hospital, its patients, and the town of Porcupine. Or folks like Glendower, who's as grumpy as they come, but does an admirable job of keeping the few things that do work at St. Ursula's in order. Even the younger workers, like Carl and Mia, do a great job of demonstrating the resolve needed to work somewhere like this. As I've said before, I'm not a healthcare worker, but in my previous job, I worked somewhere that reminds me quite a bit of St. Ursula's. Somewhere that frustrated us to no end, where we did our best to make miracles out of boxes of scraps and tried to do our jobs to the best of our ability as the building fell apart around us. Anyone who's worked under similar conditions knows exactly what all of that's like, and knows how you find strength in your coworkers, doing whatever it takes to pull each other through, whether that's serving as a shoulder to cry on, or inviting your buddy who just had a terrible shift out for a few drinks at the local watering hole. So not only does Fall of Porcupine succeed in its depiction of the hospital, but of the people who work there as well. But arguably the most effective way that Fall of Porcupine honors the lives of healthcare workers is through the structure of its story. We all lived through 2020, and remember how difficult the pandemic was. During that time period, it was harder than ever before to work in healthcare, as doctors and nurses were pushed to the limit. As time went on, they caught a ton of flack from certain segments of the public, who viewed them with suspicion thanks to the views of several prominent conservative politicians. And when many of these people eventually got sick with the very illness they doubted was dangerous in the first place, they still answered the call and did everything they could to give them quality care. We see this exact dynamic depicted in Fall of Porcupine. Ralph and Patrick lead a protest in front of St. Ursula's, accusing them of orchestrating Irma's death, something her own son isn't foolish enough to believe. But when they get sick with the virus that spreads across Porcupine, it's Finley, Carl, Mia, and Dr. Krukowski who set all of that aside to do what they do best. There are a few things that I think Fall of Porcupine could have done better, as I've said elsewhere. But there's no doubt in my mind that it absolutely succeeds at what it sets out to do: honor the lives of healthcare workers, which it accomplishes through its challenging minigames, its depiction of St. Ursula's, and the structure of its story, which references the greatest healthcare crisis of modern times. Thanks for watching. I really enjoyed Fall of Porcupine, but I would love to see it get a weird autumn-style update so its potential can be fully realized. Huge shout out to my YouTube channel members James Pruitt, Raven Lampkin, and Corey Matson, who receive early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. If you'd like to see me make more videos about Fall of Porcupine, be sure to leave a comment and let me know. I definitely have a lot more to say about the game, especially Irma's arc. It's one of my favorites in recent memory. See you guys next time.